Hey guys, what's up? So we watched one of the Oscar-nominated films. I believe it's Oscar-nominated, Sound of Metal. I'm going through the Oscar list, and I really wanted to watch this one because I forget his name, but that main actor, I remember kind of when he was in The Reluctant Fundamentalist, and then he started getting roles. He was in Venom, and he's such an underrated actor. So I'm just like a big fan. So I wanted to check it out. As a viewing experience, it has its faults. As a piece of art, it's pretty remarkable. And I do sometimes talk about the differences between those. And I think this can stand as a work of art. The parts of it that are just so abnormally strong, or when it's showing what it would be like to just suddenly lose your hearing. You can imagine that losing your hearing would be kind of, shocking. That would be pretty scary. But the way that they demonstrate it, I felt clenched like the whole time. I was just like, if this happened to me, I would be so overwhelmed with what I should feel. And he portrayed that as Ruben so effectively. That was like in every part of his performance, not the part where he was screaming and yelling. That was great, and that's like almost Oscar bait, but not really. It's actually part of the film. I'm talking about the moments where he's like trying to act like there's nothing wrong, but you can just see it in his eyes, and he just like doesn't know what to do, and he's just so overwhelmed. Those are the parts that I thought were just really great, and the film should have grounded itself in that, which it did, but there was some other stuff. The movie does not go where you expect it to go. It starts off really interesting. And then, you have this like metal rock group, him and his girl. I love that. They're living kind of like gypsies, the way they put it. I love that. I love that kind of like story building, that like foundation. I completely understood what was happening. They like go on tour. They like probably have their little niche audience. So they have their like life where they're on tour, and that's like working really well. And you kind of get some understanding of the characters, and you get some understanding of that he's an addict, and she, I couldn't tell if she was scratching herself. By the end, you kind of think that she's scratching herself due to anxiety almost, but I thought she was cutting herself. So I couldn't tell 100% by the end. I apologize for not having a definitive answer on that. I would think she was a person who suffered depression. She even said like, you hurt yourself, I hurt myself. So like there are things that indicated that. So I really like that. Then when he loses it, the way that they do that beginning part of him losing it was so good, because he like, it's both dramatic, but then it also has a little gradual component. There's like incremental where you think, not you think, but he thinks that he might get it back, and then it's just like wrong, and it almost seems like there's something in his ear kind of thing. Like that part was the part where it was very stressful, and it was so good for the beginning of the foundation of storytelling for this specific story. Actually, I really like that transitionary part. That was my favorite. Him having to go to like the pharmacy and talking about like his hearing, and the pharmacy having to call in a doctor, because like, how do you communicate at that point? You'd have to write it down. It'd be so interesting. They really did those struggles of communicating. Like you felt it. It was very raw, is the word that I'm looking for. It was very raw. It was very real. And I think that was what the film was a raw expose of what it would be like to lose your hearing. And that part was just, that floored me. I loved his relationship with Lou in the beginning. That was so like, it was so interesting how everything like unfolded. So Lou kind of like couldn't be there and had to leave because of the system of the program. And I'll talk about the program in a second. But Lou having to like leave, and that's stressing him out because she's his rock, is so... And he doesn't have a situational home. He doesn't have a set place. He doesn't have like a correct support system. He has his gypsy life, his music, and this girl. I do think one of the parts that I felt was missing was him and his music. And you might think, well, wasn't that in the whole film? It was, but I think there should have been more than just that final moment of him realizing that the implants are not going to let him hear music the same or whatever. I think there should have been more on music. I would have enjoyed to hear that. Maybe it could have grounded him. I'm not going to tell them how they could have told the story, but maybe it could have grounded him in like being able to still do it, kind of with the slide and him being able to hear music. I think that would have been really interesting. Maybe more of a depression over the fact that he's not going to be able to hear music the same way again. Like, that's, I don't know. They didn't do enough of that, in my opinion. And like they kind of alluded to the fact that because he can't hear music the same, it's not even worth it to have them. And like, that's beautifully poignant, but like, it's still, I don't know. It's still, it could have been more in my eyes. So you have Lou and that rock system going away. The program was interesting. I wasn't like obsessed with the program elements. I thought the way he got to interact with other people was great. I think the idea of like him being cut off from the world I bet you there is studies or there is ideas on that, why that is effective, for him to ground himself in. It's not about the world being okay with him being deaf. It's about him being okay with deaf and like how he resonates with his own deafness. And I get that. So I like that component. I did think it was a little extreme. I think they started to push boundaries a little too far. There are some thoughts of it being like there's a propaganda involved. And I didn't know that before I watched it. And then I looked because I felt uncomfortable by the way some things were portrayed. And I that's what was being told. So like this idea that, yeah, you don't need to be fixed if you're deaf. But I'm sorry, this guy just lost his hearing. He's a musician. Yeah, he's going to want to fix his hearing. I was like, I believe his name is Joe in the thing. There's Joe, Ruben, and Lou, main characters. Joe, the program director, I mean, I don't know. It was very unreasonable to me. I understood where he was coming from, where like we don't believe that it needs to be fixed. But like, maybe then he needed to have to go to therapy first, process it, see if there's solutions, and then come to the program. I think then he was being pushed into a program way too early before the idea that maybe he could fix his hearing. If I lost my hearing, my first thing is not going to be, hey, how do I handle my own deafness? Do I learn ASL? Do I do any of that? I wouldn't have done any of that. I would have been like, where's the solution? How much is it going to cost? What is it going to be to fix it? Another element that I thought was very negative, because I have friends who have implants. I don't have too many, but I have a couple. That's not how that goes. So there was a couple things that were really wrong with that. One, yes, you can't hear the same, but from what I've been told, you can hear everything. It's just higher pitched. That's like when they adjust it. And maybe it sounds really weird on the first day. Like the way his first day went, that was really accurate, I believe, of like what it kind of sounds like for some people. Some people, it just sounds high pitched and you kind of got it tweaked. But some people, you need to adjust it a few times. He spent all of his money on this and it's not even close. And that was like pretty devastating. And you knew it was going to be devastating. But from what I'm told, that's not how that goes. You can tweak it. It does. You do get your hearing. It's auditory training that's involved, and it's gonna be to match the pitch, I believe, because you are tricking your brain. Now, the part of that is, so there was some like anti-implant agenda that it felt like, but I don't think it was actually an agenda. I think it was, and that's what people are saying, like it was an agenda. I don't think so. I think that it was messaging because it told the story more effectively. It made the story more dramatic. It made you feel for the character. You started to get emotionally invested and gut wrenched throughout because of this process. So you get that. However, I do believe that you need to know as a filmmaker that you have a responsibility of a power when you tell these kind of stories. And the way they made it sound is, if I was somebody who was maybe going to experience deafness, I would never even go to an audiologist. It was so bad the way they showed that experience, and that is not how that goes. Yes, there are probably some people who are bad at their job, but it didn't even seem like she was bad at her job. That they try to make it seem like that's what an audiologist is. No, an audiologist, from what I know, goes through they go through intense counseling beforehand. They give you a massive expectation on what you think. There would be no way that you would go in expecting to get your hearing completely the same with the way he did it. Her going, oh, just get accustomed to it. No, I'm sorry. An audiologist probably knows that moment for him was very devastating. And you could see it in his face, even if he was trying not to show it. And they made her seem like she was an idiot, like a massive idiot. I would have never gone to that audiologist. And I thought that wasn't fair. However, we haven't been talking about the big thing, the really big thing. The use of distorted sound in the film was the masterpiece element. I bet it was kind of weird to some people. Maybe it was too uncomfortable to just listen to. But that whole thing, the way they did deafness, and then you would hear it in your sound with them hitting the table. But that whole element of it's quiet, but it's not in their sounds and they just can't process it was so it just floored me. It absolutely floored me the way they did that. When he did get the implants and it was distorted, us hearing that was just us kind of going insane with him was my favorite aspect of it. Him at the party was making me scratch my skin. I was scratching my forearm watching him go through that party scene. I don't like the way they handled Lou and Ruben's relationship at all. That was the most Hollywood aspect of that. I actually think it would have been great expectation subversion of Hollywood cliches if they could have ended up back together. This idea that they go distance for a bit and then it's just they can't work it out. And that was it. It's hey, I like that scene where he realizes that it's different. And that she doesn't want that life anymore with the scratching. I love that. But this idea that okay, maybe she doesn't want that life anymore, but why doesn't she want you anymore? Your guys' relationship is over? Why? That means she didn't even like you, let alone love you. And that's going to be my very honest, brutal truth because I hated that part of it. No. I think her not wanting to go back on the road or her not wanting to be a musician would have been great, and it would have worked out for him because he can't actually do that life anymore. Or maybe he learns how to get earplugs and he plays just off of tempo, without hearing, and he develops that ability because they're deaf musicians. That would have been interesting. All of that would have been interesting. But instead they just have a moment and she's not in it anymore. And he's it's okay, you saved me. And she goes, you saved me. And I get it. You served the purpose that you needed to in that other person's life, and that's beautiful, and they've done that in films. This didn't give me that feeling. Because we didn't even get to see that relationship enough. It was a whole start anew. His life is different now. What is he gonna do? Maybe go back to the program. Maybe teach those kids the way that that Joe wanted him to. Maybe do all of that. Maybe do something completely different. Maybe find a way to handle the implants, but I don't think so. It kind of seemed like he was getting comfortable with the silence. I don't know. That's cool. It's starting anew, but you just lose the person that loved you very much and now doesn't. I don't know. It put a bad taste in my mouth of how they show relationships because it didn't feel earned to me. Of some people just grow apart. I get it. She is back in France with her wealthy family and it feels different now. Why can't he be involved in that? Why? Nobody seemed to have a problem with him. So it just seemed weird. You outgrew him in a very superficial manner. Something I did want to say was the pacing was very slow. There was a good and a bad to that. The good in that is the movie allows itself to breathe. And I'm glad it was slower rather than fast-paced. I liked its slow elements. I like that it skewed more on the slow side because it allowed the detriment of losing your hearing psychologically breathe. That was really good. But I think they indulged just a little too much because it felt very slow. So overall, we talked about a few of the faults. This movie was brilliant in what it needed to do, which is showcase what it would be like to lose your hearing. That part, which is the main part of it, they did flawlessly. I never would have thought to have added sound distorting wise, like having distorted sound as your like main sound, having no sound as your main sound. It just was so honest. It was so raw. It really allowed you to step into their shoes for even a moment, which is just, I think, in my opinion, the reason why I would say this film is so crucially important as a view, like as a moviegoer, as a person, as an audience, that I think everybody should see. I think every single human being should see this film, is simply due to the fact that it is one of those pieces of art that allows you to relate for once, allows you to understand, allows you to go beyond empathy and make that empathy rooted in something that's informed. And that is the main part of this film, and that's why it's brilliant. All right, guys, so that's my take on the film. Let me know your guys' thoughts. Did you love it? You think it was a little slow? Did it feel like it had propaganda involved? There's so many different ways that you can view this film. Did you think it was a masterpiece as a piece of art? Did you think it was a masterpiece in storytelling? Like, let me know. The art is subjective, so let me know your thoughts down below. And on that note, I'll catch you guys in the next one.